The European colonization of the Americas stands as one of the most transformative and consequential episodes in human history, a process that reshaped the global balance of power, redefined economies, and irrevocably altered cultures. Sparked by the fateful voyages of Christopher Columbus in 1492, this vast endeavor unfolded over centuries, involving exploration, conquest, settlement, and exploitation on a scale previously unseen. Its legacy is both profound and deeply ambivalent, reflecting the tensions between discovery and destruction, innovation and oppression, and progress and human suffering. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, they encountered a world that was complex and vibrant, home to millions of indigenous peoples with diverse cultures, languages, and political systems. Empires such as the Aztecs in Mesoamerica and the Incas in the Andes exhibited remarkable sophistication, with advanced agricultural techniques, monumental architecture, and intricate social hierarchies. Elsewhere, semi-nomadic tribes and confederations like the Iroquois in North America thrived, adapting ingeniously to their environments. These societies, however, were ill-prepared for the cataclysmic forces unleashed by European expansion. The initial encounters were often marked by mutual curiosity, trade, and exchange. Yet, they quickly gave way to domination and exploitation. The Spanish and Portuguese were the first to establish footholds, carving out vast territories through a combination of military conquest and alliances with local factions. Hernán Cortés' defeat of the Aztec Empire in 1521 and Francisco Pizarro's conquest of the Inca Empire in 1533 are emblematic of this era, characterized by the ruthless use of superior weaponry, strategic cunning, and the devastating impact of European diseases such as smallpox. These diseases, against which indigenous populations had no immunity, decimated communities, wiping out as much as 90% of the population in some regions. The resulting demographic collapse fundamentally destabilized societies and facilitated European control. Colonial powers sought not only land, but also wealth, particularly gold and silver, which fueled European economies and financed imperial ambitions. The discovery of massive silver deposits at Potosí in present-day Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico transformed global trade, creating a flow of precious metals that linked the Americas to Europe, Africa, and Asia in a burgeoning world economy. The labor to extract these resources often came at the expense of indigenous populations, who were enslaved or subjected to systems of forced labor, such as the encomienda and later the repartimiento. These exploitative systems, justified by notions of European superiority and the spread of Christianity, exacted a terrible toll on human lives. The Portuguese, in turn, established a distinct colonial model in Brazil, focused initially on the production of sugarcane. The labor demands of this highly profitable industry drove the transatlantic slave trade, as indigenous populations proved unsuitable for the brutal conditions of plantation work due to disease and displacement. Millions of African slaves were forcibly transported to the Americas, their suffering laying the foundation for the economic success of European colonies. The legacy of slavery remains a deep scar in the histories of both the Americas and Africa, shaping the social and racial hierarchies that persist to this day. Other European nations soon joined the colonial race. The English, French, and Dutch established settlements and trading posts, often clashing with indigenous peoples and one another in their quest for dominance. In North America, English colonies like Jamestown, 1607, and Plymouth, 1620, began modestly but expanded rapidly, driven by the pursuit of land and religious freedom. The French, meanwhile, focused on the fur trade, establishing alliances with indigenous groups that, while less overtly violent than Spanish conquest, nonetheless disrupted traditional ways of life. Colonization was not merely a process of territorial acquisition. It was also an ideological and cultural imposition. European settlers brought with them their languages, religions, legal systems, and economic practices, fundamentally altering the fabric of indigenous societies. The imposition of Christianity, often through coercion or violence, sought to erase spiritual traditions that had flourished for millennia. The introduction of European crops and livestock transformed ecosystems and indigenous agricultural practices, while the export of American crops like maize, potatoes, and tomatoes revolutionized European diets, contributing to population growth and urbanization. The colonization of the Americas also sparked profound philosophical and moral debates in Europe. Figures like Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish priest, denounced the atrocities committed against indigenous peoples and argued for their humanity, challenging the prevailing justifications of conquest. Yet such voices were often drowned out by the overwhelming economic and political incentives of empire building. The colonization process became a laboratory for modernity, experimenting with ideas of governance, commerce, and science, but it did so at an incalculable human cost. Over time, the dynamics of colonization evolved. By the 18th century, European colonies in the Americas had developed their own distinct identities, blending European, indigenous, and African influences. The colonies became centers of resistance and revolution, challenging the imperial powers that had once dominated them. The American Revolution, 1775 to 1783, and the subsequent independence movements in Latin America marked the beginning of the end for European colonial rule in the region. Yet the structures of inequality and exploitation established during colonization persisted, leaving a legacy of economic disparity, social stratification, and cultural hybridity. The European colonization of the Americas was a phenomenon of extraordinary complexity, encompassing the heights of human achievement and the depths of human cruelty. It connected continents, reshaped economies, and birthed new cultures, but it did so through processes of violence, coercion, and destruction. Its legacy is woven into the fabric of modern history, a testament to the transformative power of human ambition and the enduring consequences of historical injustice.